Hey everyone, Chris Lopez here, and welcome back to episode number 6 in our 9-part series on ADUs. So again, my name is Chris Lopez. I'm an agent here at Your Castle Real Estate, and I've got Jeff Baker with ADU for You with me back to talk about ADUs as investments here on episode number 6. Jeff, welcome back.
Thank you. Long time no see.
I know. It's been 5 minutes. As we're recording these, we do the webinars live back to back. So, Jeff, just jump into this. People at this point know who we are. They know our voices. They know we're talking about ADUs. Jump in the meat of investments.
Yeah. So ADUs as investments, obviously they are investments. First off, who we are. If you don't know, we are a modern carriage house builder. We build ADUs, we educate, advocate, and build. We're working to push the ADU movement forward through these efforts, and we give homeowners unexpected and exceptional ADU building experience. So many people are already investors that listen to Chris's podcasts and webinars and understand that this is a investment, but many people who are not real estate investors can all of a sudden become real estate investors and have a rental property in their backyard, which is very beneficial for property management, for control of your tenants. You actually will have better tenants. You'll have better results because you're on site. The tenant will actually have a better experience as well. But these are long-term rentals as investments are wealth generators and the long-term wealth generators. ADUs, anybody out there thinking of ADUs as an investment to purchase and flip or build and flip or renovate and flip, that's probably not really the best right now. We talked a little bit about appraisals last week. Those aren't up to snuff quite yet. So you're not necessarily going to get your value back out right away. So these are long-term because if you buy them, you'll end up paying them off around 15 years on a long-term rental. And then it's, more cash flow coming in. So if you started it before retirement and then paid it off by the time you got into retirement, that'd be a significant chunk of change. From our previous webinar on short-term rentals, when we talk about short-term rentals, that may become a saturated market eventually. You might not be getting as much. They'll probably always be a little bit better than your long-term, but some people may weigh the headache of a short-term rental versus the additional income they can make on the short-term against the long-term and decide to go long-term because it's less of a headache. But long-term rentals obviously can offset your mortgage. In some cases, they could cover the entire property's mortgage. That's my plan. To do with a short-term rental is to cover my property's mortgage. But
so your plan is to live in the main house, short-term rental, ADU out back, and hopefully cover
the entire property's mortgage. Yeah. But even if once you pay that off, that you may be able to. So if you paid that whole thing down, you may be able to cover it long-term as well if you moved into the ADU. So they're easier to manage in the short-term than we talked about. Better tenant compliance when the landlord lives on site, and better tenant experience. I already said that, but if you're right there, you're going to take care of the property better. You're hopefully going to be nice neighbors and enjoy each other's company when you see each other passing on the property. We talked about market rate rental in the last webinar, but it's about 3 weeks ago. That number 1462 when I googled it is what came out for average month long-term rental. So that's $17,544 per year. So if you had a $250,000 unit divided by 17,544, that's 14.24 years. We've talked about doing mixed. We've talked about supplementing in the first few years of short-term and then going to a long-term. So you could knock that down quite a bit, but.
And a lot of times, I mean, this is before I've met you and gotten all these details, but when we were do our initial analysis for our clients on ADUs, we had a really hard time making the numbers pencil out because, for $200,000 plus on building a place, you save yourself a lot of headache and the time involved and the risk involved with construction. Just go out there and buy a straight investment property and do it that way. But I think where it becomes very interesting from my standpoint as, investor is you mix in the Airbnb or the short-term rental stuff, you mix in the flexibility it gives you. And that's where I think you kind of blend in the investment numbers with options and the quality of life it can give you on that property. Correct. So I've gotten a lot more interested in this as we've been progressing through the series.
And maybe that is a good way to look at an investment. And I think you should look at it as an investment in lifestyle or quality of life. Every owner that I've spoken to said this is the best thing that they've ever done. I wish I'd done this years ago. Cole Peterson, who wrote Backyard Revolution out of Portland, he cannot believe how much it's changed his life. And he lives in his ADU. He built his ADU, lives in his ADU, and rents his front house. So he's, we got a huge trend towards smaller spaces and people getting rid of all their extra crap that they've got. And, that might be preferential for some people. So short-term rental income. So obviously at this point, this is still staying really high. Can be significantly more work unless you have a property manager, but then you're cutting into your income coming in off of that. If you're paying to somebody to manage it, may not be legal in your city either. May provide a faster ROI, which definitely should, or a combination of long-term and short-term to reduce your ROI and how long it's going to take you to get that back. Can you handle having properties or strangers on your property? I mean, that's something you need to ask yourself. Are you okay with that? Are you okay? A lot of people, I've heard this, I think through like Bigger Pockets and different, like the one property that investors have the most problems with is the one that was their first house that they turned into a rental. Because it was their first house, they've got this connection to it and it's not just a rental, and they get more upset when the property gets damaged or whatever the case may be. So there's very similar situation. You're going to pour blood, sweat, and tears into building an ADU because you are a homeowner developer in this situation, and everything's going to be custom the way you want it. So make sure that you kind of have that set in your head. And maybe that should actually take into account to what type of finishes you're putting into the property as well. So,
and I think that fourth bullet point, which is, can you handle having strangers on your property, is an extremely good question to ask, because that's a question my wife and I asked ourselves a couple of years ago as we were buying a primary and kind of figuring out, how to offset our living costs and everything. And for me, I was like, heck yeah, I don't mind. My wife was like, no, we're not doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And so very important to figure out, because, a lot of times that's a yes or no. And if it's a no, that gives you one set of options. If it's a yes, you get a whole other different set of options. So that is an incredibly important question to ask yourself. And to be completely to stereotype people, if you're a couple out there and you're a guy listening to this and you're talking about house hacking or getting ADU and doing this stuff, loop in your significant other much earlier in the conversation, because a lot of times that is how the things progress when I talk with clients. Is the guy's gung-ho, the wife, the fiance is like, yeah, no, I'm not gung-ho, and then we're kind of back to the drawing board.
Mm-hmm.
So figure out that question sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and then the next bullet point, the separate entrance from the alley or the side of the property. So we're seeing that's how I'm going to do mine. I want to have a separate entrance off of the alley. Therefore, I don't have people coming through my yard, through the backyard. We got dogs. What if they leave the gate open and then our dog's out on busy city street? So they're all things to think about. And I believe having that separate entrance is a value. I think your guest will like it better as well. It activates the alleys, so that's going to help with your alley problems if you have any alley problems in the city. And I think it's just really good to have that separate entrance so you don't have to deal with it. If you can make it so our design, our windows are high, they're not looking into our neighbor's property, they're not looking into our property. So really, I shouldn't even know that somebody's in the unit from my house unless the light's on. And kind of like the old Motel 6, we'll leave the light on. If I see the light on there, then I know I'm making money for the evening. So that's how I did do a lot of thinking about that, because I was like, do I want to give somebody a key to our side gate? Or
so
put a code on that? Or
are you going to have like separate yards as well?
Probably not separate yards. We did talk about adding that amenity, and I guess we'll kind of see how it goes once we get into that. But there will be two entrances. So there will be an entrance from the yard side that'll be accessible by a spiral staircase, and then the alley side as well. And my thoughts is the tenants would come in the alley side, and our guests, like if I have family or friends over, we'll hang out in the house. Time to go to bed. Okay, get out of my house, walk across the backyard, walk up there, or climb up the staircase, and you're in the unit there. So we have not looked at, first of all, we haven't even really looked at the landscaping part, because your yard will get destroyed when you do this. So do not
couple steps ahead there in your process. Right?
So that we definitely should think about that. But maybe we find out after we do it, we're like, yeah, you know what? It's not so bad having them share the space. But we got 3 dogs, and like I said, the side gate. There's all sorts of things you got to think about. So, and I like the activating of the alleys. I think that is a phenomenal way to use these spaces that have kind of been given up on. Most alleys are just places where the dumpsters are, or they put their trash and recycling on trash and recycling day. It's their access to their garage. But these could be nice spaces. You look at some of the laneways, as they call them in Vancouver, that have a lot of these.
What do they call them?
Laneways.
Laneways.
And they're actually naming the alleys now as like streets, laneway streets. And the ADUs up there are called laneway houses. And we actually have some people in our neighborhood that have the vision of, maybe 15 years down the road, what if one alley turned all into ADUs and there's no garages anymore and you didn't need vehicle access? Maybe that ends up being closed off and you turn that into kind of a pedestrian garden area where it's a walking and biking area, but cars can't go through there.
I'm all good for that, because that means personally I'm a step closer to having a self-driving car, which is like one of my ultimate dreams. So I can just get in the car and have it drive me.
Yeah. And if you look in a lot of the Blueprint Denver and a lot of the city planning for Denver, they're banking on the fact that we're going to have less cars and that there's going to be less individual drivers on the road, more self-driving vehicles. I think the younger population is definitely into alternative transit. We're going to get more RTD light rails coming in. I just heard the other day that RTD is the #1 transportation district in the country, and that federally we're recognized as,
really?
I shouldn't say RTD is recognized as a leader. And so once they get through some of these other transit systems in some of these big cities like New York, Chicago, where they're old and they need a lot of renovation and help, those federal dollars are going to those projects now. But apparently the Denver RTD light rail system is top on their priority for when they get more funding down the road. So maybe 5 years down the road, we're going to see more light rails coming in, and maybe smaller inner city type shuttles or something like that. That'll make it easier.
That's great. I mean, I've lived all over the country, and I think Denver has an amazing light rail system compared to San Francisco, New York, DC, LA and other cities. They're non-existent, or they have them, but no one uses them.
Yeah. And I would love to see our usage get up here. And I think as time goes on, that will. And like I said, I think the younger populations are not getting cars as much. They're looking at riding bikes and taking transit and the scooters. And I see people on these electric skateboards, which blows my mind how fast they're going. I'm like, what happens when you hit a rock on one of those things? You got to just get launched off. When I rode a manual skateboard as a kid, I definitely remember catching rocks and get launched off the skateboard. So
you were also young and invincible back then too, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
I remember those days.
Yeah. And we're a little bit off subject there, but
yes.
I think that, my goal, I'm in an area that has light rail. It's not connected to the A line that goes to the airport yet, but eventually should be. And I would love to be on my short-term rental listing, have the instructions for somebody to get off the plane. Okay, get onto this train, go to this baggage, go to your baggage terminal, and then go to the plane to train to plane, and come right into my neighborhood and walk the 3 blocks. So I envision guests rolling their bags down my alley and not bringing a vehicle. But we'll see where that goes. So think about the design before you build it. Think about potential privacy concerns. We touched a little bit about privacy on my property.
Yeah. I'm curious, I guess, I mean, that's really good thinking on your part. I understand what you're saying. I feel like it's one of those things that would be very hard to think forward and do. I mean, what were some other items you did or considerations you had on like the way you had the window layout and all that? So what were some other things you did?
So, well, first off, on the side properties, we originally had transom windows, which is not a style window in the historic district. Even though it's not visible from the street, they didn't like them. So the transom's up high. So they're up along the ceiling, so we're getting light in. But that is going to not allow them to look into the neighbor's yard. And
you're saying they allowed that or not allow that?
They did not allow that.
And transom, they're like those
the long
rectangular windows up high? Okay.
Yep, exactly. And so we actually eliminated those from our side properties. There's no windows on the side of our building. And then in the backyard, they're not transoms because, once again, they don't fit the historic character. So they need to be a window shape that match the historic character, because the yard facing side, you can see a little bit of it from the street. And so they want those windows to be more traditional to what the historic district wants. But we put those high. So you'd have to stand on something in the unit. You'd have to get something to stand on it to see into our yard.
Oh, okay.
So they really can't see into our yards. And then the other thing, so you're eliminating a lot of windows in this, and then you get a dark space. So put skylights in.
Is that what you're doing?
Yeah, we're gonna put a skylight.
That makes
so
sense.
that'll make it so much brighter. It'll also be a movable, operable skylight, so we can open it up. It'll release a lot of heat out of there. We got the French doors that go over the alley, overlooking. It's just a little Juliet balcony basically there, and so we'll be able to open that up and have the skylight open, and you should be able to get a lot of airflow through there to cool that place off.
So I got a really random question here for you, because I always go to like kind of some of these paranoid thoughts. You're not worried about a tenant leaving the skylight open and a thunderstorm comes through?
Yeah, potentially.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, that's think about your design before you build. Yeah. So, I mean, maybe that's something that that's on the cleaning crew's checklist to make sure that they do that. Or they do have all sorts of automatic ones now. I'm sure they got ones that have rain sensors on them.
I would imagine that too. So, I mean,
so I haven't actually picked that product for our unit, but we'll update you.
Good.
Yeah. What features deliver a better customer experience? So who's your customer? Is it a short term? Is it a long term? So what features could you put in there? We're specifically talking short term right now that would deliver a better customer experience. Some things that I've thought about is providing bikes. If you're in an area where you're very walkable or bikeable, that would be excellent to provide bikes for them to use. I've even thought about what about getting one of those little smart cars? And I haven't looked into insurance on this, but what if you had an option to upsell them to a car rental? All the hotel sites do it, but maybe they don't want to rent a car for the whole time they're here. They're like, no, I'm just going to take the train. I'm going to walk to the unit. But one day we want to go up and see Mount Evans, but we don't want to we got a rental car right there. So that might be something that you could offer to provide a better customer experience.
They also have, I can't recall the name now. I always call them like Airbnb for cars, where you can.
What is that called?
It starts with a T.
It starts with a T.
A TU something. But
or
something like that, where you can rent out your car, by the afternoon or by the day, and people just rent it out. I know people doing it, and it's a great way to, again, minimize another expense.
And that might be the platform that we use, rather than just saying, yeah, come talk to me. Say, you could have information in the unit saying you can go rent this vehicle and it's parked right out on the street. Don't piss off the neighbors and don't piss off the city. So follow the rules. Tell your neighbors what you're doing way in advance before you even think about going to the city to talk about this stuff. Get your neighbors on board, and if they can be part of some of the design. I think I mentioned that 3 or 4 webinars ago that we actually asked our neighbors, hey, what do you want to see on this side? And they wanted brick because they got this beautiful courtyard with this 6-person table and this water feature and all these beautiful flowers and everything back there. And what would they like to see in their courtyard, since we're about to build a second story that's going to tower over their courtyard? It's actually going to probably give them more privacy in the long run, but we asked them what they would like, and they wanted brick. And I even offered to put some sconces over there to light the courtyard that would be running off my electricity, but they could pick the sconces and we'll mount them onto the side of the building. And so I think all of that, anything that you can do to make sure that they're on board will help. Not too many neighbors are going to be keen on the short-term rental. I mean, and especially if you're not a good property owner or manager and you're putting bad tenants in there with lots of noise. If you are thinking about short-term rental, another thing to think about is maybe you need to do a little extra soundproofing. That little bit of money might save you hassles from police getting called or your neighbors getting upset. So maybe talk to your architect and your general contractor to make sure that you say, hey, is there a better soundproofing thing that we can put in here on the sides? Because I don't want my neighbors to hear this.
Are you doing that?
Yeah, I actually did ask about, let's get some additional. So one of our sides is double brick wall. So that's pretty sound.
Do you know what type of material you're using?
I don't, but I was looking at another. So we got to have fire stop on those walls. So there is an insulation that you can put in there that's won't burn. So that could be an opportunity, but maybe we can put another layer of foam or something in there that will do the soundproofing. So I haven't gotten that far in the details yet, but I can update you on that. So short-term rental rate example, $100 a night. This varies with season. Let's say you had 60 nights of vacancy. Let's drop it down $10 even more. So 305 nights at $90, that's $27,450 a year. So in the same price point that we used for the build on the long-term rental calculation, that drops about 5 years off of your ROI if you do short-term rental. And then if you do a blend of the two, it's going to be somewhere in the middle there. But that's pretty good. I don't know any other rental properties that you can pay off in 9 years.
I got to ask you, are you including interest and financing costs in that calculation?
No, that's and you got taxes and everything else. So that's definitely a very general number.
But it's a good back of the napkin idea. Yeah.
So mixed use, we've touched on this a few times. Short-term rental for the first few years to get a jump start on your ROI. Switch to long-term, corporate rentals, 30-day plus rentals, or just short-term when your friends and family aren't using it. Maybe you're going to use it most of the time, and you're going to throw it on Airbnb every now and again just to get some money. Maybe this isn't a lifestyle investment and not a financial investment. Maybe this is just something that you want to have for the flexibility, and so you're willing to not necessarily make as much money off of it, but short-term or long-term front house and live in the ADU. So if you long-term a 2,500 square foot home versus your 500 square foot ADU, you're probably going to get not that $100 a night. You're probably going to be getting $300, $400, $500 a night, and probably longer rental stays as well. Probably get more families or wedding parties or things like that if you're going to rent the front house on short-term rental. Or corporate rentals, which we talked about. Seems like less of a headache. I think there's a potential there to get all of your payment up front. I mean, you might be able to get $4,000 a month. If you're getting that on your short-term rental and the corporate rental wants to come in, you can say, hey, I'm getting $4,000, so it's got to be at least the same. And you might be able to get 6 months up front and get a check written to you for $24,000. So then you can go invest that into down payment for your next offsite rental property or something. Other uses, split the back lot for affordable home ownership. This is not something that's really an option here in Denver. But I could see as this progresses down the road and this becomes more available in other cities that might come back into picture, because we're talking a lot about affordable housing. But we're only talking about affordable rentals, really. We're not really talking about affordable purchase. And this would be an opportunity to have for purchase homes.
So you're almost talking about like taking where the ADU is and
splitting the lot,
splitting it, and then making it its own separate address and parcel ID. So I mean, almost equivalent to taking a duplex and doing a party wall and splitting it that way, but just actually doing it with land. And
so, like I said, that's not something that is possible right now.
Is that just due to cost or just the way the zoning
I don't
works?
think that they really want those lots broken up like that. And right now you have to tie all your utilities into the main house. So that's going to be a separate permitting fee because you're going to have tap fees to be able to go onto your own. So that may never be a possibility, but I think that if we're looking at for sale affordable, that might be a way to add into that housing stock. Home office, home gym, you could build a three-car garage, put an ADU on top of it, maybe portion some of it off as a gym. Or an office or a workshop. We talked a little bit about showroom garages in the past, and that's just making a super fancy garage, man cave type garage, where the floors are done. You put trench drains in there. You got sinks. You got potentially hose, so you could wash cars, or the female version of she shed. And Paul, our architect that we work with, has done an ADU with a she shed on it, and it's really, really nice looking. So once again, flexibility might be your investment. Multi-generational families. The trend started in the mid 20th century was to move family units to move away from multi-generational to nuclear. And the housing size also increased as people moved away from the cities. People are moving back into the cities now. And this could be an investment in your family. If you're not going to charge rent, then you're helping out a family member. Maybe, mother-in-law or mom or dad needs help or both. You can have them on site. We talked about doing the nanny thing, having them live on site and be able to nanny and be so close to the grandkids. So that trend is reversing. Much is due to the cost of living, which is increasing. So people are kind of not being able to afford. And so they're moving back in. The grandparents can help finance, potentially help the young couple while they downsize, and then help with the daycare, or grown children with disabilities, or having an on-site caretaker. Maybe you don't live there. Maybe your parents live in the front house. You build an ADU for them, and then their live-in nurse or caretaker could live in that and not have to be in the same house, but they're right on site. So as far as advocacy goes, we've been touching on this a lot because we want everybody to get involved and push this forward. So sign up for our newsletter at youradu.com. Sign up for our meetup group on Meetup. It's called Colorado ADU Backyard Property Investors. Tune in for our next webinar. We're going to be doing a couple more next week and the following week and the week after that. And it's a 9-part series. This is number 6. And we've got planning board hearing and public hearing and vote coming up on Monday, April 22nd. I'll put that information on the next page. So show up to that and voice your opinion on what you think about ADUs and that they should be being built all over Denver. Call us, ADU for You, to build an ADU and use it as a demo site like some of these kind homeowners have done for us. We did one last night. We're going to be doing one in June. Another thing we're looking for is a web editor to run an advocacy website. So if you're interested in doing that, that would be making sure that we're creating enough content and you're kind of managing the people that are creating the content and staying on top of that to get that advocacy side going. And then we'll talk a little bit about Blueprint Denver, which I just touched on. So that meeting again is April 22nd. And if you can't make it, you can email Blueprint Denver saying you support ADU recommendations in Blueprint Denver. If you don't know what Blueprint Denver is the next 20-year plan for the city, and it has recommendations for ADUs in there. They're going to adopt that very soon as long as they don't get enough pushback to stop it. So if you can support those recommendations and you want to see them available more broadly in Denver and get that Blueprint Denver adopted ASAP so we can implement this, because zoning will follow this and zoning is going to take some time before the zoning changes. So if you have a house in Denver on a property that is not zoned for an ADU, you are the ones who should be voicing your opinion on why you want these so we can change the zoning code and we can build ADUs on your property. That's our meetup group. Our next location is to be determined still, but it is on June 11th and it's going to be in Arvada. We'll be touring an ADU afterwards. It was a lot of fun last night. We had a great turnout. People really enjoyed it. Property owner was on site to ask questions or answer questions and talk about his experience. And he's actually one that almost wanted to live in the ADU. He moved in while he was renovating his house, and with a family of 4, it's 650 square feet. So it's tight, but he was like, it was great. We loved it. They did it for, I think, about 2 months.
Wow. That's cool.
He was like, we could actually probably stay in here. So small space living isn't as tough. And there's our information for contact. We can talk a little bit more if you have any questions, Chris, or anything that I missed that we want to address, but these definitely are investments. And if you're not a real estate investor, you want to become one, put one in your backyard, and now you're an investor.
No, this was great. And I'll put a lot of these notes and links you mentioned in the show notes, of course. But yeah, another good episode, Jeff. Thank you for coming by.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me. We'll talk next week.